in my opinion, there's 4 distinct things that we've done in the past 5 years that have had the most impact on homicide, specifically homicide, although non-fatal shootings as well. First and foremost is we created this gun unit that's only job is to focus on the illegal firearms, and that's what they do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They focus on illegal firearms. They've done a fantastic job because of their expertise, and they've gotten better and better over the years. They're very successful all the way through prosecution of these cases, and that has sent a real message that if you're caught with an illegal firearm, the penalties are going to be pretty significant. I think that has helped quite a bit because we've seen a real shift away from firearms. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. A shift away from homicides and firearms and homicides even. So the gun unit and that focus on illegal guns has been huge. The gang intelligence unit. So up through 2008, what drove most of our violent crimes, shootings, and homicides was gangs. I'm sure you remember we would have spikes over a weekend where we'd have 11 or 12 shootings and 7 or 8 homicides in a weekend. If you think back to Trinidad. And it was really very specifically focused on gangs and retaliation, so we had to really put a lot of effort into that. The gang intelligence unit is the core of that effort. Now that they work, the gang intelligence unit is the core of that effort, but they do work very well along with our school resource officers and our patrol officers. So I think their impact to stop the retaliatory violence, we haven't seen since 2008 those multiple shootings going back and forth and retaliations like that, because the gang intelligence unit, as soon as a shot's fired in a neighborhood, they know which validated gang members are beefing with who, and they know what areas are in conflict at the time, and most often they're proactive enough to mediate before the violence starts, but if there is a shot fired, they immediately mobilize and go to the gang members and try and cool things down. That has been tremendously helpful. I think the support from the public, people coming forward and giving us information through our tip lines, through our anonymous tip lines, through cooperation with our detectives. A statistic that I show people all the time, because it's so hard to show what you prevent and show things that are non-statistical, like cooperation. We started with the anonymous tip line in 2008, and we only had 292 tips that year. As of November of this year, just for the calendar year, we had 1,830 tips. So you're talking about a 527% increase in tip information. So that has shown that the public is more and more willing to give us information because they know we act on it. And then in terms of reward payouts, we pay up to $25,000 for arrest and conviction in homicide cases. And all the way through 2007, we paid out on average no more than $200,000 a year. That's not a lot, given we had 186 murders in that year. We're well over $500,000 this year, and we have been up around $500,000 and over for the past several years. So people are not only willing to give us information anonymously, willing to share threat information about violence with their beat officers, but they're also willing to go to court and testify if necessary. Because in order to be eligible for that, you have to be willing to go to court and testify if necessary. So having those folks willing to do that has been a tremendous help. And then the last of the 4 things that I think that has been helpful is we diverted an awful lot of our budget in 2007 to technology, and bringing that technology to make us more efficient and to make the criminals less successful has been tremendous. The combination of ShotSpotter and CCTV and license plate readers and automated enforcement and all of those things has allowed us to focus on the things that are most important and do those things much more efficiently. I don't believe in just tagging neighborhoods and people in neighborhoods as gangs like we used to do a few years ago. I believe that there should be a real validation process to validate whether somebody truly is a gang member or not just based on 1 or 2 criteria, but a whole host of criteria. So once we started validating gang members and validating gangs, I'd say 5 years ago, I'd tell you we probably had a good 70, validated gangs around the city where you had 5 or more validated gang members, and based on that criteria that we're engaged in criminal activity of various types, drug dealing, guns, gambling, robberies. But that's down significantly. The number of gangs that are active, I'd say, and of concern for us, and there's some slight variations here and there, is significantly less, maybe 10 across the city that I think still pose a threat to violent crime. There's also been a shift in the type of activity that gang members are engaging in. A lot less gun crimes, a lot less violence against each other, and just more criminal activity. The more criminal activity is not good, but the less violence is. Gang members, first and foremost, they have to be involved in some sort of criminal enterprise. So there's got to be crime. I mean, you can wear colors and have your name of your gang tattooed to your face, but if you're not committing crime, you're not in the gang. I mean, there's a criminal element to this. So the gangs that we see around the city are engaged in different types of crimes, criminal enterprise, but that's one thing that is a required criteria to be part of a gang, is that you have to be involved in a criminal enterprise. So there is a variety of things that we use to validate a gang member. Some are self-admitted. I mean, there are a lot of gang members who have their gang tattooed on them, and they'll tell you they're a valid member of MS-13. MS-13 being one of the ones that really typically has no problem admitting being part of a gang. Organizing in that gang around criminal activity and participating in that criminal activity. So there's 4 or 5 different things that we look at, but most of which I think are things that, I know one of the things you're asking about is, how can parents look out for trying to keep their kids out of gangs. And what I see with the gangs that we do have, and what I hear from the parents of those gang members, is that it starts with a marked shift in friends that they hang out with, a marked shift in behavior and secrecy and patterns of what your child normally does. Oftentimes there is clothing that they identify by, whether it be colors or names. And tattoos are also, not all gang members do tattoos, but a lot of them do. So I think those are the things that most parents, while paying attention, are the things they pick up on right off the bat.
Let me see. Cool.
Other thing I would add, because I'm hoping there are family members and parents that will see this, is that if your kids are coming home with expensive clothing and shoes and electronics that you're not sure how they're getting the money for those things, that's another sign that you should be checking into a threat too. So over the summer, we engage about 6,000 kids, and through the DC Police Foundation, we have very positive mentoring programs. We're doing college tours, and we're taking students STARS program with students taking a different route to success. So they, teenage girls and boys. And through the funding through the DC Police Foundation, we're able to take these kids during the summer and engage them in positive activities that does 2 things. One, it builds a relationship with the police, so they know we're not the enemy. We're here to help and make sure that they're safe. And 2, it gives them a chance to envision that they can go to college, that they can accomplish other things, and they get to see something positive in their life, and hopefully their experiences with a lot of our corporate sponsors that work with the foundation, they get opportunities to meet some people that will help them along the way. So I think that's helped us tremendously. We haven't seen the large number of kids involved in shootings over the summers, because we're engaging them as many as we can in these programs. Well, for many, many years I've heard police officers make excuses, and more often than not I've heard police officers say, well, we can't stop homicides, and I'm adamant that we're not going to have that mentality. So to answer your question, my answer is, my gut instinct is no, there's nothing that is beyond our control. People say, well, if a homicide occurs in a domestic violence incident behind closed doors in somebody's home, how can you stop that? I'm not saying I can stop every one, but I'd be willing to bet in that domestic violence homicide that there were several interventions with the police prior to that homicide. We've been to that residence before. We've had contact with that victim before. We know that that suspect has exhibited violence before. Did we do everything we could do to try and prevent it from getting to that point?